Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Board Games Hitting My Table. This is where I talk about all of the games that I have been playing over the last couple of weeks. This episode covering the first half of April 2024. Now, before I get started on the games I've been playing, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer. And if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. But let's start with a 3-player game of Yorvik. So this has a mechanism that I really love, and it's one that I think is massively underutilized, where you have this queuing system where each round a certain number of cards come out, and on your turn you're placing one of your meeples kind of below one of those cards to kind of put a claim to it. And then at the end of the round, once everyone's deployed all of their meeples, you will start from the front of the queue and work backwards, but the people at the front get kind of first refusal on that card, but must pay a coin for everybody else in that queue. So it means that the more sought after cards are much more expensive, but it does mean you want to maybe get a claim to it as early as possible. But the trick to this game is that it is very difficult to manage your funds because money is tight as anything. I really do love the vast array of strategies you can go or approach this game. You can kind of try and fight off these foes and get points that way. You can collect these resources and convert them into points and compare them against these contracts. You could even just get a straight up set collection points, etc. So there's lots and lots to do here. I think the approach I took ended up paying off quite well because I ended up going for these big set collection bonuses. I pretty much ignored the resource management part of the game, and I did pretty well on fighting off the barbarians. And I had this card that I reserved right into the end, which I actually acquired in the first round, which would double the points you got from successfully beating off the barbarians. So therefore I saved it right to the end, kind of wagered on myself on having the most defense power, and then I ended up getting double points from that, which just got me through that finish line and got me the win. So, if you watch my channel regularly, you probably know that Stefan games are my jam. I love his approach to game design. Now, I suppose the only hesitation I have about this one is that it is quite similar to a game called Spirium from the oldest Starry line that I have in my collection. It does share that mechanism, and I think I slightly prefer Spirium to this one because it has a few different ways to the queuing mechanism is a bit more dynamic in Spirium because you can actually choose to back out and get money instead of the actual going for the card itself. So you can kind of approach it in two ways, whereas this one, money is so tight that you really do have to pick and choose the cards that you want. But still, it's a very nice game. I kind of feel like I've seen everything with it now, but this is, I think, one of the Feld games that have flown under the radar and should get talked about a bit more. So that is Yorvik. Enjoy getting that one back to the table. I played a 2-player game of Wild Tiled West, one of my favourite polyomino style games. I like the different strategies you can go for in this one. It's a drafting game where you're picking up these different kind of polyomino tiles through this dice system, deploying them on your player board, trying to increase your income, and wrangling these cows, fighting off these fighting off these bandits with your sheriffs. And I'm trying to remember how the game played out. I think I did quite well out of the wrangling, which I tend to normally approach the game on. And, usually I focus quite heavily on fighting off the bandits, whereas my opponents tend to ignore that, or at least not focus as much. This time I ended up missing out a bit more on that because I was a bit more wild in terms of taking these more lucrative tiles that have bandits inbuilt onto those tiles. So a bit more of a risky strategy, which did end up, I believe, kind of hurting me during the game, but I think my end game scoring in terms of my objective cards ended up getting me the win at the end. But still, this one has a very nice flow to it. The box does actually say up to 90 minutes. I think you can get this played in about 45. It's actually pretty punchy, and that 90 minutes is a big kind of top estimate if you're playing with a full player count. But yeah, this one is a lovely little polyomino style games. I love those polyomino games where the tile placement isn't just the game, it has other things going on, and this game certainly has that in spades. On to a couple of 2-player only games now then. So I managed to get Patterns back to the table. One of my favourite games that I've played in the last year or so. I think it's a spectacular design based on the original Mandala game. It has the same scoring system, but the gameplay is completely different as you're basically maneuvering these different tiles around the board, trying to collect groups together. Now, generally speaking, I'm pretty good at this game. And I believe this most recent game that I played was my biggest challenge yet, because I think it was only a couple of points in it. So definitely a micro decision that's made the difference there. I think I did just squeeze the win, but yeah, certainly did push me to my limits. But this one, if you like the original Mandala game and didn't know this was a thing, then you know I could not recommend this one enough. It is one of the best abstract games that I've ever played. Speaking of another two-player abstract game, so I actually ended up reacquiring Kahuna. In fact, I'm not sure if I ever owned this game, but I did used to play it on the digital app. But this one, for some reason, I wanted to give it another go, and I'm glad I did, because I played some more of this now with the actual physical version, and I do like this game a lot. So it's this game where you're trying to control these different islands by playing these cards and building these bridges between the islands. But if you have the majority of bridges of your colour touching that island, then you'll get control of it. And once you kind of burnt through the deck, you will end up doing a scoring, a couple of rounds, and then the final round will be like whatever the differences between you and your opponent will also dish out points. Now, gameplay-wise, I think this game is fantastic. Very cutthroat, definitely very cerebral. But I feel like the scoring could be tweaked a little bit to make it a bit more punchy, because the game does play out over 3 rounds. I think that might be 1 round too much. And if you ended up, say, maybe playing through the deck twice and then just calculating the difference between you and your opponent, I think that might be enough in terms of, you know, getting a full experience from the game. And maybe there's a balancing issue there, I'm not quite sure. But for me, I think I might give that one a try, give that mode a try the next time I play this one. But definitely a classic. You can get this one very cheaply on the market now, and I would recommend it. We played another, I think it was a 2-player game of The Veil of Eternity, another one of my favourites from 2023. A little tableau builder where you're kind of building up this little arrangement of characters, trying to kind of synergize those cards together in order to get powers and abilities and race to get to a certain amount of points. Now, every other game apart from this most recent one, we've ended up finishing the game on, I believe, round 8, because you tend to get quite a good engine built up by then. This most recent game, there was quite a few rounds where the cards weren't really points gathering style cards, so it ended up dragging the game on a little bit longer, which is not a bad thing at all. It's still a very fast game, but it meant we had to tweak our engine just a little bit more. I tried to think of the approach I took on this one. I think I had a lot of end of round abilities that were very small, so generally cheaper cards that gave me a point or a coin here or there, and it just ended up chipping away and just giving me giving me a bit of a lead. Normally when I play this game, I tend to focus on these big swingy moves which give you a big chunk of points at once. This one I approached it completely differently, and it goes to show that you can tackle this game in lots of different ways. But one of the best card-driven games of years, to be honest. I think it is an absolutely wonderful game. I have recently reviewed this one and obviously gave it a very high praise, so check out that one if you want to know more. On to some other games now. We played a 3-player game of Gift of Tulips. Now, this was a Kickstarter game that flew under the radar. I think it is still available at retail. But this is a kind of a set collection style game with a degree of commodity speculation, where on your turn you are kind of playing this Biblios style system where you can either keep cards to yourself or give them away, or even add them into this kind of market changing pile. But it does have a couple of mechanisms that I think are quite interesting, where if you give this, say, the strongest suit of cards to your opponent, then you get quite a nice amount of points, where if you keep the weaker cards to yourself, you also get some bonus points. So the game has this kind of rubber banding system which encourages you to boost the weaker suit to keep the game feeling tight, which I think is a really nice touch. So it's actually quite a nicely designed game. Now, I don't think it's anything special, but I think it's good enough to maybe give a few more plays to see if it has the staying power. But it's nicely, well, the card art is nice. There's a few little production issues in terms of the score track being too small, but the gameplay is decent. Now, again, I don't think it's up there with the great card games, but it's kind of on that on the periphery of being really good, and also the kind of mediocrity. So it's kind of a strange one. I've not quite put in one of those camps yet, but it's been a while since I played this one, and I'm glad I did play it because it did remind me that this game has some cool little touches in terms of that giving the strong cards away and keeping the weak cards to get some bonus points. We played some more Far Away. So this is one that did really well on my most recent ranking video. Another little kind of tableau builder where you're playing these cards in a row and then scoring them from right to left. Now, I find this game really difficult to extract points from. This is definitely a bit of hotness at the moment. And if you struggle to kind of find your feet with this game, then please do let me know, because both games, well, I've only played it twice so far. Both of the games I've done really poorly on, really struggling to get points from this one. So yeah, I think it's quite a tight game with very minimal kind of margins for error. But I do like it. I love the system. It's so smooth, and I think the potential to have a good game is in this one, but it's very difficult, and sometimes you are definitely subject to the cards that come out, and you have to be prepared that some of those cards are just not going to score at all, and you might need to use those cards as prerequisites for other cards rather than the scoring objective itself. So I don't think you're going to score for every single card in this game, but it'll be interesting to hear from you guys if you have managed to score every single card. More card games now. I played a 2-player game of Forest Shuffle, and love this little kind of set collection style game. In fact, one of my favourite set collection games of all time, as you're building up this kind of tableau of cards with these trees, and you're tucking other cards behind it in order to score tons of kind of set collection bonuses, where all these cards kind of cross over with each other and score you points in different ways, kind of sliding scale points and stuff like that. Now, I usually approach this game in similar ways, where I'll go for the I can't even remember what I normally go for, but I definitely tried something completely different here, where I focused on these deer cards, and then I did some cards that gave you points for having more deers, and that ended up scoring me a lot of points because I think the scaling was quite high in terms of how many points it would offer, because the deer cards are pretty rare. So knowing my opponent was ignoring those cards, I thought, let's go all in on them, which ended up doing me really, really well. So, and I also focused on, there's a certain suit of tree that manages to score you points based on how many you have of that type. And I ended up getting, I think, 7 of those, which is the maximum scoring, which again is another huge chunk of change when it comes to points. Now, my opponent was quite unlucky, because they tried to go for this shoot the moon style system by having all the different tree types, and I think they managed to get like 7 out of the 8, so they were very, very close. If that paid off, it could have been a very different story, but I do love all the different ways or different things you can dip your toe into to try to squeeze every single point out of this game. It is a wonderful design. It does get some criticism in terms of imbalance, but I think if all the cards are present to you, and you are in a shared market in this game, so I think it's pretty balanced, to be honest. I've got no issues with the balancing. We played some 3-player games of Quicksand. So this is one, again, I've acquired this one quite recently. It's a real-time cooperative style game, which is normally 2 red flags that I don't go for, as you're trying to manage these sand timers by flipping them over, playing cards, and moving them along this track without these sand timers running out. So again, real time, definitely a frantic style game. We played this with a different group who I normally play this with, and we were definitely a lot better than we were with the other group. I think we played really well, actually, so quite looking forward to going further into the scenarios, getting harder and harder with that game group to see how we get on when it gets really difficult. That is Quicksand. On to a few more now. So we played a 3-player game of World Exchanges. Definitely an underrated little flip and right style game, or it kind of has an economic edge to it, as you're managing your funds and buying and selling different kind of these currency, well, not cards, what they call like country cards. You buy them at the right time, sell them at the right time to try and get the most points. Excellent game. Played some more Treta. I have acquired the expansion to this one now, which I haven't played yet, so quite interested to try that one. But I introduced this one to a new group, and it went down really well. I think we're all generally fans of Coloretto anyway, so if you like Coloretto, you're probably going to like Treta. I'll rattle through these next few games a bit quicker. Manhattan, actually, I want to talk about Manhattan. We played a 4-player game of this one, very tense game. I seem to be a bit of a punching bag in this one, as I really did struggle to get anything going here. A nice little area control game from yesteryear, as you are trying to have dominance on this map by having a number of different buildings out, or controlling the regions, or even having the highest tower. Again, I did really poorly on this one. I seem to again be the brunt of everybody's malice, but that's fine. It was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed teaching this one to I think 2 people who had not played it before. That one went down really well for a bit more of an aggressive game. And moving on to some fillers now. So we played a 3-player game of Matrioska. This is an interesting set collection game, as more and more you're displaying more cards from your hand, trying to collect rows and columns of these different kind of Russian dolls. I do love some of the mechanisms here, but the gameplay seems to be pretty pointless because people are collecting different suits and or suits and numbers, and you have this kind of trading mechanism, and it just turns out that the cards end up sorting themselves out, and you end up in the ballpark of the same point. So it feels like a bit of a pointless exercise, and it's going to be a very minimal decision on who determines the winner or the loser. But again, I like the concept. Definitely would be nice to see like a version 2 of this one, but as it stands, I think the game is slightly flawed and won't really stay around much longer. The same goes for Pungy. It's almost like a trick-taking style game, as you're playing these cards to collect these other points cards. The game does not work at 3, which typically is the player count that I normally play games at, because the last player gets way too much say on which card they're going to take. Played some Audrey Palter. Definitely I had a fun game with this one. I seem to be getting worse at this game as you are dropping these things from your hand to try and collect this ghost, and then you get bells. The more bells you get, the more points you get, but it makes it more difficult to carry on because you're also holding those bells in your hand. Yeah, very frustrating game, but also a very fun game. Played a game of vegetable stock, one that I've not played in a while actually. We actually ended up tying by the end of the 6th round, so we wanted to play a further round just to determine the victor, and I think the market went completely in my favour on that last round and ended up tanking my opponent's score, which was quite funny. But yeah, nice to get this one played. Definitely a game that's starting to get a bit of wind under its sails, which is nice. It's a nice little commodity speculation game. We played a 3-player game of 5 Towers. This is a nice little kind of bidding style game, as you're bidding on how many cards you can take of these different tower types. But the cards are numbered, and you have to play them in numerical order, going from high to low. So once you've committed to something, you can't really go back on yourself, at least not without losing a lot of points. So it's all about pacing yourself and trying to do things at the right time. A lot of luck involved, I suppose, but it is knowing kind of when to bet to kind of pull the trigger and move on and push on with these different towers. I think one of my opponents kind of had their foot on the brake a little bit too much. And I managed to push just right, and I managed to cap a couple of these towers off to get double points, which ended up getting me the win. But I do like this one. I think there are a few too many rounds in the game where you can't really do much, which is a little bit frustrating, and I think it does hurt the game a bit. But it's such a quick game anyway that I'm not really bothered by that. So at least not enough for me to think negatively of it. But that is 5 Towers. Also played a 2-player game of Gap just to finish off a games day. A nice little kind of a hand management style game, as you're playing cards to collect cards from this row. I love the scoring system here, where it's going to be your biggest pile or piles of cards minus your smallest pile or piles of cards. So if you manage to balance all the cards perfectly, then you'll score quite a lot of points. We only played 2 rounds of this. I think the first round I pulled ahead quite a lot, and the second round we tied. So that was just enough for me to get the win there. But this one is a one that's not really taken off. If you are interested in your clever little card games, then check out my review of Gap. And a couple more games that I've played that I've not got the copies of here. We played a 4-player game of Heat, Pedal to the Metal. Nice little racing game, kind of based on the Flamme Rouge system. I do love this gear changing system, as you know, flying up and down gears. This game, I think I've been hit or miss with this one. This most recent game I played, I think I did quite well, as I definitely took some hard corners, taking a lot of those Heat cards when I needed to, and just shedding them at the right times. So I think this is one of those games where everything just seemed to work out for me, which was quite nice. And we also played a 4-player game of Modern Art, a game I've played a lot of over the years, kind of an auction style game with an interesting degree of commodity speculation and set collection, as only the most popular artists for the round will score, but if they score again later, then those totals are combined with each other, making them even more valuable. The game played out pretty straightforwardly, as the most popular artists remained pretty popular, and there wasn't really much throwing people under the bus, but it's definitely a game of leverage, and that played out in this game where, you know, if you have the popular artists in your collection, and those artists still come up for auction later, and you are the auctioneer, then you're going to do well, because you're either going to win the card yourself, or you're going to get all the money that other people will pay for those most popular artists. So again, hand management does come into play here, and sometimes it's a bit more opaque than it might first appear. But I do like this one, and I think this most recent game I played of Modern Art was one of the best I've had in a while, actually, as we all did pretty well. But one of my opponents did exceptionally well, actually, by managing their art, their hand, and their money very carefully. So a good game, all in all. But that's it, really. That's all of the games that I have been playing. Definitely, generally on the lighter end of the spectrum here. But it was also nice to get Yorvik played. But hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to my channel, and check out my other content too. And for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye-bye.